Welcome to the Clarity Advisor Show, where you'll learn how to grow your team today. Join Ken Trupke and his guests as they discuss what works and doesn't work to grow your team in today's world. And now, your host, Ken Trupke.
Hello, and welcome again to the Clarity Advisor Show. We know that remote work has changed a lot of things about how work gets done, and no area in business has been impacted by remote work maybe as much as the sales function. So today's guest is no stranger to this show. Master sales trainer and coach Joe Pici is here today to talk about remote work, especially within a sales team, and what has changed and what's still true in sales today. So from sunny Orlando, Florida, welcome, Joe Pici. Coach, how are you doing today?
Thanks for having me back. It's always great.
Yeah, we certainly appreciate bringing you in, especially to talk about things that you're seeing day in and day out and the expertise and wisdom that you bring to that. So let's just jump right in. So this transition to remote work, that's impacted traditional sales techniques. So what do people need to do in sales today to pivot and be still be successful in a remote environment?
Well, let's just start with onboarding, okay? When you bring on a salesperson and they're going to be remote, please do not hire just because they have a great resume or they come highly recommended. They're going to need training. And you have to make sure they're capable of remote sales. It's a different ballgame. Remote selling is different than face-to-face selling, but then remote selling when you're by yourself in your home, wherever, and you're not part of a team, that changes the game so much. So the first thing we have to do in onboarding is we've got to have clear expectations. We have to let this person know this is what you're going to be doing. And then we have to train those areas.
Right. So having expectations, and really that's across any teammate you're adding to the team, is going to be being clear about expectations. So for a salesperson, especially if they're going to be remote, so how do you go about doing that? When does that happen? Is that in the interviewing process? Are you waiting until they actually are getting started and in that onboarding phase once they've started with a company? When do you start talking about expectations and what day in and day out is going to look like?
I think we have to stop selling a sales position and start qualifying the sales position. Why do 92% of people who do outbound sales, why do they fail? Why do they quit? Okay. Or why is there such a high failure rate in virtual selling or remote selling? Well, it's because the person who was hiring them was telling them all the great stuff that they had to offer, but they weren't qualifying them. I think we have to be honest during the interview process. This is what it's going to take to be successful. This is what we expect. Okay. This is how we're going to hold you accountable.
Now, how are those things, if they are at all, how are they different today in a remote environment?
Oh, it's 10 times harder. For example, you and I'm older than you, okay? We both have a hair problem, so we're not young. But just think back when sales first got started, and a lot of times people drove in, went into an office, and they got into an environment. They had coffee together, they had donuts together. They had a bell, they had an attaboy. There was an internal peer pressure of, hey, that guy's on the phone over there. I need to perform. There was the manager walking around. He might have been a taskmaster, he might have been an encourager, but there was still a certain amount of built-in accountability and positive peer pressure. Now you go to the remote world, okay? And these people are in a place where there's a refrigerator, there's a television, the dog needs to be walked. And there's so many distractions that if this person doesn't have the ability to close off distractions, to time block, and really keep the main thing, that's going to be a problem for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk to the leaders now. So the sales leader, she's got a team of remote salespeople, and maybe she is used to in-office people. Maybe she's new to sales and this is all she knows, but how does she succeed in leading this remote team? What's different about working with the remote rep than how it used to be when everyone was, like you said, in the office?
Well, first thing, you don't want to call them every day, okay? But you do want to have a Monday morning, okay? Almost a kickoff meeting. As you put them 10-10s, you want to have that Monday morning. You want to have midweek check-in, and you want to have Friday afternoon. Hey, let's pull the team back together. So I believe in individual meetings. I believe in group meetings. But again, let's not mistake, okay, leadership with management. Heavy-handed management is when people feel like they're checking on me. But if I'm a leader and I'm checking in on my people and I'm giving them a call, is there anything I can do for you today? How's it going? Have you been able to get that call block done? Are you having any challenges? So I think communication is vital in a remote team.
And that's not every day, you said. So a couple times a week they're checking in besides those kind of bookend group meetings on Fridays and Mondays. Is that what you're suggesting?
I think number one, it's gonna be Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Okay. You're gonna start the week, end the week, but then there'll be a midweek. But then if I'm a leader, I want my people to have access to me and know if they have if they need help, that's what I'm there for. They need to pick up the phone. They need to call me. They may have a question. Just like my coaching clients. I have remote coaching clients all over the country. Okay. Well, they know that if they call me, if I'm in a meeting, or if I'm in a coaching, I'm going to get back with them. A lot of times, like at a break or at no, because if they're calling me, there's a challenge. I want to help them get through that challenge. So communications, once again, is vital, even more vital in a remote environment.
Yep, makes sense. Now, in the old days, Joe, right back when you and I were getting started, managers would go on ride-alongs with their sales people. They actually go on sales calls physically in the car to the customer, to the prospect, and then on the way back, you'd coach them up about here's what I saw, here's what I learned, and use it as a training experience. What are your thoughts on the value of that ride along, and if there is value, how do we do that in a remote environment?
Well, number one, when I think about remote, I think about remote selling, but then I also think about virtual selling. And my philosophy, and this could be wrong, but I don't like milk runs. And what I like is I like a preliminary phone meeting to qualify that if people are going to get in their cars, if people are going to go somewhere to do a meeting, that's more of a follow up or next level meeting. Then is it good to have a manager to coach them up on that? Absolutely. Okay. It is absolutely essential. I think in a world of remote business, remote sales, we've got to become expert at an initial qualifying sales call that will reduce wasted meetings, reduce wasted time, increase closing ratio because you're sitting with a qualified person. Now, if I bring my manager with me, they're going to coach me on the finer things. Okay.
So, what is that initial? You're suggesting phone call, literal old school phone call, right? What does that phone call look like to qualify that prospect?
Well, as you know, because you've been with me for quite a while, my initial phone call starts with a value proposition. Hey, Ken, this is Joe Pici of Pici and Pici. Did I catch you at a bad time? Well, what's this all about? I'm working with remote sales teams to help them book more appointments and close more business. Now, if you want more information, I go into what I call a core story, which is about a 5 to 7 minute discovery, asking qualifying questions. Once I get through my qualifying questions, then the question is, okay, do you want to set up a next meeting? Are we ready to set up the next meeting? Okay. Or do you want to go to an initial proposal? So I believe in that initial meeting as a qualifier because I see people driving all over the place. Okay. They don't want to go into an office, but they don't mind going into somebody else's office, right? They drive all over the place only to be with unqualified needs. So remote sellers, okay, have to be coached so well because they're not in an office. They're not learning from the guy over there in the corner that's hitting it out of the park. They're all by themselves. A lot of times, you and I talked about this. Many times, people's homes are not set up like a good office. They might have the corner of a room somewhere, or they might have a room where they can close the door and who knows what's going on, with the kids. So they really have to build that environment in.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, I know you're a big fan of phone calls versus video calls, but what are your thoughts on the time and place for a video call? And could that be that initial qualifying call, or does that really need to be a phone call, and why?
Okay. Are you talking about when you say video, like a Zoom?
Like a Zoom, sure. Zoom,
Right.
Teams, whatever the tool
Right.
is.
Now I'm going from my vantage point. I'm going from what I train. There's a million other people out there to train something different. All right. It is so hard to get people to a Zoom. I mean, the other day, a guy says, "Well, can we set up a Zoom call?" And well, I got to get my administrative assistant, and I hope my new computer works. You know what? If I get somebody on the phone right now, and we can move into that preliminary core story, that preliminary qualifying meeting. The second meeting can be that Zoom, that StreamYard, that Skype, whatever your Teams, whatever you're using. So again, a very succinct, high quality initial meeting is going to get you a better meeting. So when you get on the second time, there's a good chance they're not going to be alone because you've created enough interest that now they may bring some decision makers into meeting number 2.
Okay, and that might be the time that we as a sales rep want to bring along our leader, our manager into that call, either as a ride along to coach us later or as value to bring to the meeting.
Absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. Well, this is always so good, Joe. I've got many more questions for you, and we will tackle some of those about remote work on the other side of the break. Stay with us with Coach Joe Pici on the Clarity Advisor Show.
Is your business where you want it to be or on track to get there? Clarity Advisors helps business leaders improve communication and get your team aligned and engaged for greater success. We specialize in helping you streamline your sales and operating systems to improve efficiency and grow your profits. Call or text Ken at 616-822-2998 to have a complimentary 12-minute call to see what some clarity could do for you.
Okay, welcome back to the Clarity Advisor Show. Today, we're talking with Master Sales Trainer and Coach Joe Pici about remote sales teams. So, Joe, on the other side of that call is that customer. And in a remote world, they're probably at home and they have a million distractions around and they might not have a good home office setup. So what can reps do to keep those prospects and customers engaged in a video call or even a phone call from a remote, in a remote world?
Conciseness is the key to quality meetings. I mean, one of the reasons why we lose people is we talk too much. We don't have an organized process for this meeting. I've done meetings with CEOs of major corporations in 9 minutes, right? Because I didn't get into, all of the stuff they used to teach in 1947 about talking about people's cats. Okay. I keep everything the main thing, which if you do that, you will build trust. You build trust through your actions, not your words. So when I say, would it be worth 15 minutes for me to show you how we can help you generate more leads, book more appointments, close more business? I promise you, I'm going to keep that meeting tight. So the first thing I would recommend people, whether it's a video meeting or a phone meeting, be concise, be politely direct. Become a master communicator of the DISC model of human behavior. So therefore, you can speak in their language, but what enough directness that there's no confusion.
Okay. And when we're on the phone with them and they might be getting distracted, so conciseness is a key way to keep them engaged. Tell me a little bit more about the DISC behavioral model and how that helps you keep that customer engaged in the conversation.
Well, the first thing we have to understand is if I know my script to get the meeting, if I know my stuff so well that I'm not thinking about it, then all of my focus can be on that person's communication style. So therefore, yes, in fact, I am going to elevate my speech when they do. I'm going to do a certain amount of what how they receive information, that's how I'm going to give it. But then based on their words, I'm going to learn what we call priority, which if they're task or people oriented. Task people buy for one reason, people buy for another reason. I'm going to move the conversation to one of those priorities where I'm going to get better traction. And so if I learn how to speak their language, not to manipulate, but to communicate, we're going to have a better meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. And building that trust, and I know you've got a whole course on this, number one in the world on building rapport, not just trust, but building that relationship. So talk a little bit about that in a remote world when you're on a video call instead of in a room. What are some pivots we need to make? What are some strategies and tactics we can use to build rapport and make that genuine connection that's so necessary in sales?
Well, I'm just going to give you an example of the last 10 meetings I've done. Okay. The comments I've gotten have been this: Joe, you build rapport so quickly because I trust you, because there's no nonsense to this meeting. You know why you called. I know why you called. You didn't dance. You got right to it. Okay. And you listened more than you spoke. That's the key. To be great in sales, remote sales, virtual sales, phone sales, we must be great listeners first. That's the key.
So what are some of so what are some of the biggest differences as you look across remote work and sales teams that used to be in-house and now they're from their home or wherever? And what is different, and what was both positively and negatively? What has changed, especially for companies that didn't start out in a remote world but had to pivot into a remote world? What's working and what's not working right now?
Okay, well, let's talk about the negative part first, okay? The old camaraderie, the old patting each other on the back, the old, like I said, internal peer pressure, the old, hey, Friday afternoon, looking at the scorecard, high-fiving, the old, hey, let's all go out to lunch together. There's a certain amount of camaraderie that happens when people are in an office, whether it's sales, customer service, operations. That's built in. People need people. Right? That's a positive. That's a positive. So the negative part of that is when they're spread out, they don't get that. Now, the positive thing about remote selling is you can blanket the country. All right. You don't have to have people flying all over the place. Also, it saves companies money on office space. It saves money on travel. It's less evasive for that salesperson not to have to drive 20 miles to get to the office. So there's good and bad in everything. I kind of like a hybrid. But for some companies that I work with, their people are spread all over the world. They have no option. And so they're always saying to me, how can we create a culture? Folks, it's almost impossible to build a culture the way we view culture. I think you can build synergy, teamwork, but the old fashioned, the culture thing where we all wear the same shirt, we all fly the same flag. The minute things went virtual, there's a lot of freelance going up. That's why leaders have got to maintain messaging, work hours. They've got to make sure the non-negotiables are being done. They've got to make sure a certain amount of calls are happening. They got to make sure a certain amount of meetings are going on, how many proposals are going out. They have to make sure all of those things you have to do are getting done.
And that brings us back to your opening comments around onboarding, that setting those expectations so everybody knows, like you call them the non-negotiables. What do you have to do here to succeed? What are things that we expect of you so that you know it right up front, and then expect to be managed to those things? Is that accurate?
Yeah, I've got I got a client here in town, and what they've started doing as part of the interview process is they'll bring me at the end and they'll just say, "Hey Joe, not if you can just call this person and kind of do what you do and find out what you think." Okay, great. So I call this one guy. He was out of state, and he had worked in the warm market his whole world, and now they're going to B2B sales, and B2B sales is not warm market. Okay, as you know. a lot of it's going to be cold. So I asked him this question: what are you going to do when you run out of warm leads or referrals? He didn't have an answer for that. Well, I immediately called the owner of the company that I was coaching, and I said, look, I'm not telling you not to hire this guy, but I would be very concerned. He's never worked in a cold environment. You're in a cold environment. I'm not sure he's willing to pick up that phone and call people he's never called before. Well, they hired him on potential, which is, potential in football is an asset left on the bench. It gets people fired. And after 90 days, they had to let him go. And so I think we have to be really careful. Can this person execute what they have to do to sell?
So it sounds like one of the biggest differences from traditional in-office sales to now remote sales is the culture, the difficulty in creating culture. That's one of the negatives. What are some of the positive things that you're seeing? What are some of the benefits of having a remote team, especially a remote sales team, and being able to sell remotely?
Oh, I think you can get really good talent because there's a lot of good talent out there that want to dictate that they want to stay home. All right. I mean, the script is flipped. All right. In other words, now you have people of talent saying, yeah, I'll come to work there if I can be remote. So now there's a trade-off. And the trade-off becomes, do I want to go after this one that really can hit it out of the park, monitor their work, all right, have my meetings with them, but give them that flexibility so we can hire them. So now you're seeing, so I see that as a positive for the salesperson for sure, but I also see that it opens up an opportunity for companies to go after some top talent.
Absolutely. All right. Last question before we get into some of the things that you've got going on these days. So take us back even before onboarding. In a remote world now, what's different about what we need to look for when we're hiring a remote sales rep? We know they're going to be working from home. What do we need? What characteristics, traits, whatever it is, need to be in place that maybe didn't used to need to be in place or not as much and now that we're in this remote environment?
I think we need to do a better job on background check. I'm not talking about dishonesty. I'm talking about where did they work before? Did they, were they ambitious? Did they have self-discipline? Did they work hard? I mean, you and I had this conversation. I think when you're working remotely, okay, it's like we're not in my office today. We're in our studio. But if you were to look at my whiteboard from January 1st to June 31st, I got over 200 proposals out. And people go, wow, that's grinding. Well, remote salespeople have got to be understanding they're going to have to work that way. So we got to do a background. We got to find out where these people are coming from. Do they have the work ethic? And once again, we have to spell out the expectations. And are they willing to receive coaching? Now, hear me. If a person's not willing to receive coaching and they're not getting the job done, you're in a no-win situation. They're not going to get better.
Right. Yeah. If they're not performing and they're not willing to work on things to get better, not going to get better. Absolutely. All right. Well, Joe, as always, this has been a treat, and you just bring so many great ideas and perspectives and wisdom from your years and boots on the ground right now. You're seeing this, you're working with sales teams and salespeople every single day. So talk about, I know you've got a sales boot camp coming up in October. Yeah. Talk about that. And then I know you've got a gift for the listeners.
Yeah, we do. Well, October 23, 24, 25, and we got a half a dozen seats left is all. We have our 3-day sales boot camp. And by the way, it has been ranked 4 years in a row, the Rapport Mastery Sales Workshop, #1 in the world by global gurus. We do live calls on day 3. Okay. Also, for any of you consultants, speakers, and trainers out there, we have a 3-day boot camp at the end of October for people who want to make money and monetize their intellectual property as speakers, trainers, coaches, conventions. All right. And here's the other thing. The Sales Edge podcast, subscribe to that. We just found out by Podfest, our Sales Edge podcast is in the top 2% in the entire world. So I have a gift for each and every one of you. If you take out your phone and if you go to the text box, you're going to put the word Sales Edge, one word. If it splits it, put quotes around it. You're going to text it to 55678. Sales Edge to 55678. It'll take you to Pici and Pici. Hit it. that'll take you to a splash page. There's a free masterclass, 8 Essentials of Sales Success. There's links to the podcast, tremendous downloads. But here's the last gift I'll give you. If you ever want to have a conversation with me, let's have a cup of Joe. 407-947-2590. Thank you, Ken, for inviting me back.
Absolutely, Joe. You're welcome. It's always great to have you. And we'll get links to all that stuff, the text messaging service, your podcast, Sales Edge, as well as your phone number into the show notes so people have easy access to be able to reach out to you. And obviously, I strongly encourage anyone to reach out to you for that cup of Joe. You're going to get a few minutes of wisdom, and there may be more value there than you expect. And there might be some way you guys can work together. So definitely reach out to Joe if you've got questions about sales or business in general. Certainly a wealth of wisdom. So with that, it brings us to the end of another Clarity Advisor show. Thanks for joining us. If you could be so kind as to leave a 5-star review on the platform you are listening or watching right now, that would be terrific. See you next time on the Clarity Advisor show.
Thank you for listening to the Clarity Advisor show. Clarity Advisors is a speaking, training, and consulting firm specializing in helping you simplify your sales and operating systems to improve efficiency and grow your profits. Connect with Clarity Advisors today to learn more about how they can help you improve communication and get your team aligned and engaged for greater success.